There are religions that are as rigid as the shaft of a lance. They demand blind, unquestioning compliance. They spread their hierarchy to all fields of human action. These religions resist change of any sort. They were laid down by men who wanted to make sure that those who followed would forever remain in a spiritual prison.
I am not here to debate with anyone. I have spent my entire life studying this subject. I only debate with my equals. All others I teach. I have spent much of my childhood and my entire adult life studying
deception, manipulation, misdirection, mind control, hypnosis, propaganda, and many other things which relate to those subjects. I've spent long hours meditating on evil, what prevents it, and what protects people from it. No law will ever protect anyone, ever. It is now necessary that we release ourselves from the bondage of the fiction that is known as the law. You have been deceived into believing in something which has no tangible existence. Getting someone to believe in laws as protections or as an assurance of something is much the same as hypnosis. When you hypnotize someone, you have to suspend their rational mind and get them to believe in something which does not in fact exist anywhere in time or space. The whole of the world is duped by an illusion. It is one chiefly used by criminals, their cohorts, and people who have been duped into believing in the mirage known as the law. Criminals are always found making laws, administering interpretations of the law, and the religions some of these vermin have created are composed of an abundance of laws. They make the laws, break the laws, and yet they have you hypnotized into believing laws exist. The only power the criminals or their puppet governments have over you is illusion and fear of disagreeing in the existence of their illusions. The Constitution is a piece of paper invented by Freemasons to appease cattle. Laws are fictions. There is no law outside of fiction. We are not talking about the laws of physics, and there never has been. No one is protected by a law. No one is granted anything by a law, nor do they have anything taken away by a law. It is fiction. If someone says,
"There is a law that says you cannot get out of your chair until I say so,"
the only thing which binds you to it is your agreement. This is the essential principle of hypnosis. In other words, getting someone to agree that something exists when in fact it does not. If you rise out of your chair before the person gives you permission, you did not break the law, as you cannot break something that does not exist. What you did was disagree in the existence of their fiction. We can certainly use the term breaking the law as a term of convenience, but it is more accurate to say disagreed with the existence of the law. Once you begin to think in these terms, you will see that laws are fictions. The only thing that binds you is your fear and agreement.
You just ran that red light and broke the law. No, sir. I disagreed with the existence of the law. You believe in the law. I do not. What proof is there that it exists? It's written down in a book somewhere.
We don't want people to run red lights, but we do need people to begin this kind of thinking as we face people getting their food, water, and firearms taken away from them. They are creating laws to take away your firearms. But these laws only exist so long as you agree to their existence and are unwilling to face the consequences of your disagreement. The law cannot take away your firearms. A human being has to come and take them away, and you have to agree to give them up. We must more often speak of the non-existence of laws than the trampling of them. Most people do not know the law or anything about the Constitution. The propaganda that says,
"Our constitutional rights are being taken away,"
is self-defeating because it gets people stuck on the idea that it is the Constitution that must be reinstated. The thing that must be reinstated is the individual's responsibility to their fellow citizens. This requires courage. It requires growing up and being an adult. It requires real men. You cannot gain anything by reinstating the Constitution because it is fiction. It is like saying,
I have an imaginary friend who's 6'8" and protects me, and I want you to tell me he's standing right next to me and protecting me. Okay, fine. Your personal imaginary bodyguard is standing next to you. Are you happy now that your protection is reinstated? Yes. Now I feel safe.
Then they take a baseball bat and bash your skull in. Where was your big bad bodyguard? That is the Constitution. That is what a law is. It doesn't exist. It is fiction. It doesn't stop evil from doing what evil does. And that's why the criminals and Freemasons have got you and everybody else caught up in it. Gun rights advocates say that laws don't prevent criminals from obtaining a firearm if they really want one. Well, great. Then by that logic, laws don't prevent tyrants from trampling your rights. Since that is, in fact, the case, why are the gun rights advocates always screaming for laws to be retracted or put in place to ensure their right of ownership? If a law cannot prevent a criminal from obtaining a firearm, then a law cannot prevent you from obtaining one or otherwise grant you the ability to have one. Why do gun rights advocates insist on the reinstatement of law? For one, they do not understand what a law is. For two, it is because they don't have any intention of ever using their firearms. And it's much easier to say,
please, Daddy, give me an okay to do.
Fill in the blank. If Daddy says no, they pout and wail, but that's all they're going to do. Now they have an excuse to be a coward. And since most people believe in the illusion of laws, our society is rife with cowards masquerading as patriots, nationalists, activists, rebels, revolutionaries, or other words that should only be reserved for real men and brave women. Criminals don't follow laws. Cattle does. Why are people trying to wrap themselves in a protective blanket of laws? Because they're scared sheep who find it easier to believe in a fiction than face the reality that they actually have to fight criminals and risk their lives. Laws are the way of the hypnotist. There never was a right. It doesn't exist. People are trapped by thin air, vapor, nothingness, an illusion. If people's masters don't obey these fictions, then why do their slaves obey them? Because they're cattle in the eyes of their criminal masters. It is easier for the weak to throw their hands up and say,
well, I guess I cannot do this anymore because the law says so.
And then pull out a protest sign instead of bravely disagreeing with the fiction and saying,
I'm not going to do this simply because you say so, and I will defend my liberty with a firearm.
We weren't born with rights. No one ever gave us any, and no one ever took them away. Because a right doesn't exist anywhere in space-time. You do not have a right to food, water, good health, safety, happiness, or anything else. Once you are confused into believing you have these rights, or those rights, and that they are granted by a criminal Freemason or other piece of garbage, in other words, the present criminal government, then they have you trapped in an illusion of something which you have gained. Now you're focused on the importance of a document. Now you've got a new daddy. Even though you're a grown man or woman, nothing was given to you because a right does not exist. A document can only give you information. Knowing something is not an insurance of anything. If someone claims that you have gained anything but information from a document, they are lying to you. If you believe them, you are hypnotized. We were born free, and free means you are free to do as you please, when you please. Free does not mean you have a right to be protected from someone blowing your brains out because you were free. to break into their house. However, you do not have the right to be born with legs, born with perfect mental faculties, born with fingers and toes, born with eyesight, or born without disease. Free is not a right. It is your freedom of choice, and your choices are dependent upon what you possess and are willing to do. The concept of rights limits your thinking to the sphere of what you can or cannot do. But that is a lie, that you are limited, because you can do anything you want to, so long as you possess what is necessary to do it. At this level of your understanding, we can now see that there is only freedom and consequences. And beyond that, there are liberties, which is a power, the state, for instance, saying,
there are no consequences for doing these particular things.
That means you have liberty. So we have freedom, liberty, and consequences. Now that is reality. Everything else is a fiction used to trap the human mind. Laws should exist for the following reasons.
As reminders of what the nation's culture represents. We don't pollute our land, we don't spit on sidewalks, we don't scream foul obscenities in public, etc. As rules to ensure the safety of the people. You don't run red lights, and so on.
Laws should not exist for the following reasons.
As promises or guarantees of rights or liberties. As insurances that will prevent tyrants from taking evil action.
Anyone who tells you they are going to guarantee you a right or liberty with a piece of paper is a liar, or does not fully understand evil or what a law is. A law can never ensure you anything. The only thing that can is your willingness to act and face consequences, if there are any. A law can never ensure that a politician or nobleman will not suddenly decide to do something evil, because a law is nothing more than an agreed upon fiction. If a person no longer agrees to its existence, it becomes invalid to that person. You cannot do that with a bullet. The tyrant can disagree with the bullet all he wants. It still exists. People may say that under certain systems, whatever system of government the person that you're talking to happens to prefer, of course, it was more difficult for a politician to do something harmful to the people because of the laws of that particular system. That is not true. For instance, I prefer monarchy as a system of government, and there have been great monarchs who kept crime down. But it wasn't simply because of the system of monarchy. The insurance was the threat of force, consequences, and the willingness of the state to use force. In the story of Jesus Christ, when he rages into the temple, he didn't bring a list of laws. He brought a whip. If the same event happened today, it would have been an AR-15. He had the liberty to make a whip, the freedom to act, and he faced the consequences. One of the best nations that ever existed were those of the American Indians. They did not have written laws. They relied on the threat of violence. They did not have prisons. Benjamin Franklin could not understand this, because he was trapped into the idea of laws. Honor was among the highest virtues of the American Indian people. Benjamin Franklin once remarked that he wondered about how he would ensure that American Indians would pay him back, because the threat of imprisonment was not their way. He said that they lived solely on their word, honor, and they would never tolerate any contract that held the threat of imprisonment, because they had never imprisoned their own people. It is unfortunate that some people are unwilling or unable to conceive of anything outside of their own culture. If we want to protect our own culture, we would do well to understand how other peoples protected their own. In American Indian society, what ensured people honored the cultural laws was the threat of violence and the willingness of men to use violence when necessary. That is grown-up culture for adults, for responsible people. What we now have all over the world are societies for children who want to believe fairy tales protect them. This was not the way we used to do things. Having a massive system of laws and presenting people with documents that supposedly guarantee their rights or liberties is Freemasonic in nature. Criminals always want to get the cattle to believe in laws which guarantee nothing, protect no one, and which the criminals do not themselves follow. One of the most powerful forces in human history were the Vikings. As opposed to regurgitating the Freemasonic influenced culture that was created in this land by men who were sworn to a lodge, and not the American people, the laws of the Vikings were recited by a man who had committed them to memory when they met for the thing, which means a meeting for legislative and judiciary powers. The Vikings never presented any written document as the insurance of rights or liberties, nor as a protection for the people. Your protection and insurance of liberties was your willingness to fight. The element that ensured people were honorable in old Nordic culture was revenge, visiting violence upon people who disobeyed the law or severely wronged a free citizen. There was never any trust put into any law. Believing in laws as protections is a tool of criminal domination. Understand this. Once you have laws in place that say that towering Viking over there isn't allowed to split your head wide open, you are then hypnotized into believing that there is something that's going to stop him. All the Viking must do is have a willingness to face the consequences. If he is prepared for that, what happens to you when he decides to disagree with the existence of the law? The thing that prevented Vikings from causing havoc amongst their own people was the threat of violence. We should take a lesson from men who were finely tuned to the harsh realities of the world, lest we resign ourselves to slavery. The only thing that keeps a slave in the status of being a slave is his agreement that he is a slave, and his unwillingness to act. A slave does not have rights, not because they were taken away, but because rights do not exist. A man who was not born into his slavery, but was captured and made a slave, used to have liberties, but he never had rights before his slavery. He had liberties that existed either because there was no one around yet to take them away, or because his slave master was waiting till an appropriate time to take them away. Furthermore, an unshackled slave still has the liberty to run away, no matter how many times he is told that that liberty doesn't exist. That liberty is only gone once he believes it exists. Belief in such a thing is a belief in a fiction. The law does not stop him from running away. Only his agreement and fear of consequences does. A law does not exist anywhere in space-time. It is a fiction. The people in the United States are slaves, and they have always been. It is just now more apparent to the people who could not see it before. U.S. citizens never had rights. They had liberties, and they still have freedom. You are always free to act and face consequences. No one can ever take away your freedom. They can only reduce the sphere of how you can act. But you have to allow them, and you must be responsible and admit that no one is to blame but you for your unwillingness to act. Or maybe they can take away your freedom. This is now the last level of your understanding, and it is the only thing that will make you a sovereign. You can be placed in concrete so that you can no longer move, and then, yes, you no longer have freedom, but you had the freedom to act against the people that wanted you frozen in that concrete. Now you must understand that the word freedom must be reduced to the word liberties. Since freedom can be taken away, there is no sense in calling it freedom, or talking about,
My freedom's been taken away.
They are not freedoms, they are liberties. So now we reduce our list to two principles, liberty and consequences. That is the truth. Everything else is propaganda used to comfort the weak. If I were to create a new nation, I would not lie to our people. I would not sugarcoat anything. I would not build a nation around laws which exist to supposedly protect the weak, because a law can never protect any people from a tyrant. If we say we are going to design a system of laws that will be much stronger than previous legal systems in preventing tyrants from taking action, we would be building a nation on a pack of lies. Therefore, if we should build a new nation, we would never make any law that claims to guarantee rights or liberties, nor claim that any law prevents the state from acting tyrannical. Our men and women would be raised in the way of the gun. If someone tramples upon your liberties, you reach within yourself and find the testicular or ovarian fortitude to do something about it. Our citizens will be allowed to possess and carry firearms, concealed or otherwise. Yet there can never be any statement that says that the state cannot take away your firearms, because that is a lie. If the state becomes corrupt, it can and will take away your firearms, as the United States has repeatedly done. We must always be honest with our people. The only thing that will ensure your liberties is your willingness to use a firearm. That is the way of the gun. That is the truth. That is honesty. And it is the only mindset that will serve to protect our people from a tyranny. Anything else is a lie. Some might be wondering,
what if the state becomes corrupt?
find your courage and use your firearm.
What is to prevent the state from taking away your firearms?
Use your firearm.
What is to prevent the state from poisoning the people's water supply?
Use your firearm.
What is to prevent the state from shipping our jobs overseas?
Use your firearm.
What is to prevent the state from sending our sons and daughters off to die for war profiteers?
Use your firearm.
What is to prevent the state from taking away our liberties?
Use your firearm. Any other answer is a lie. No law nor system of electing leadership will ever prevent corruption, evil, or the misuse of power. If I were to create a nation, laws would only exist as reminders and as rules for how one should act. No system of laws will ever ensure that people will not break those laws. The state must be honest and transparent. Such a nation would not be a place for the weak or cowardly, people who want to be told lies about how a piece of paper protects them from anything or guarantees them anything. People have a choice. They can face reality, or they can keep listening to liars and their fairy tales. Laws will never
Protect or ensure human beings anything. Ever. This is the way of the gun.
Phantoms lured me off my course, tried to kill them.